Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. Today, I want to talk about the differences between e-education and the traditional face-to-face English classes. E-education is a little bit different, and I want to explain how it's different. Perhaps you haven't taken an italki class before, or perhaps you're not accustomed to e-education. There's some things that you really need to know. The first thing is that when you go to a traditional English class face-to-face, the teacher will have a course prepared and he's going to work through that on your level. So there'll be a class of people more or less on the same level, and he's going to take you through English bit by bit, usually with grammar. In an e-education course, it's a little bit different because there's only you and the teacher. It could be that the teacher appears with a lesson pre-prepared. Some people do that. Some people like to ask you before the class, what do you want from the class? And then we'll come with a whole list of grammar topics and points to help you with that. But more often than not, students don't give any kind of background as to what they're looking for. They might say, oh, I want to improve my speaking. They might say, oh, yeah, I'm doing an IELTS. But most people don't. So the trial lesson usually is spent trying to work out what the student needs, what the student wants, and what the student really is looking for. There's a bit of confusion there sometimes. So a lot of time in e-education is trying to work out what motivates you, how you like to practice, and what your goals are. Many people who come to e-education come for speaking practice because they don't often get that in face-to-face classes. So they might be having traditional English classes and they might use a platform like italki just to practice speaking. And that's also fine if that's what they want. E-education is largely very informal. So it's not the same as a face-to-face class. It's true that the teacher may be informally dressed. The teacher may also use informal language with you. So the e-learning courses and classes are much better as an introduction to English culture, because there's usually less focus on grammar and more focus on your performance in that class, because there is only you and the teacher. The dynamics are a little bit different. For example, you need to make sure that your teacher isn't sitting there texting messages to his friends while he should be there learning. You also should not be afraid to directly ask the teacher how he's going to help you. So if the teacher has agreed with you what an issue is, like speaking, for example, ask him directly, okay, well, what's my future classes going to be like with you then? To give you some kind of idea. From my experience in e-education, I often let students lead the class. And the reason why I do that is because when you're at home, when you're sitting in front of your computer, things don't always go the way they should. There has to be a space there to talk about a bad day. Maybe the person is not in the right mood to have a class. Maybe things just haven't gone well in that particular week. Maybe homework hasn't been done. And there has to be a way of looking at those kind of things. Whereas in a face-to-face English class, there's usually rituals involved. There's the traveling to the English class, the fear that the teacher might ask you something that you don't know, the idea of not doing your homework is a little bit alien. But in an e-education class, things tend to be much more personal. Things tend to be focusing on you, and there's greater scope for flexibility. If the student says, well, I didn't do my homework, I'm sorry, it's been a terrible week, the teacher has to have something else there to focus on, to take conversations forward. One of the difficult things about e-education is the teacher must identify exactly what the student is looking for. If he doesn't do that, then the classes may well wind down into simply a conversation. How was your week? Yeah, fine. How's your mother? Yeah, she's okay. She's at a hospital now, she's doing well. Oh, that's good. And these conversations can become very personal between you and the teacher. A good teacher should be able to move conversations away from personality into higher topics, to get your views on different things, to discuss with you meanings and influences rather than things which are personal. If you feel that you have a good relationship with your teacher, that's wonderful. But remember, teachers aren't experts. And if you've had any difficulties with teachers, address them. It's probably something like a cultural difference, or maybe the teacher made a comment that you don't like, or maybe you feel that the teacher isn't listening to you. All of these things you need to address. So don't hold on to them thinking, oh, I'm afraid to ask the teacher that. Say it. Teachers hear everything. So it's very important that you are open and honest. If a teacher isn't meeting your standards, then change. There's loads of teachers on italki. We all bring you English, but sometimes the cable that we use to give you that message is a little bit different between teachers. Me personally, I'm more into motivating you, empowering you, so that you can take away things from the class and use them outside of the class. I don't want you to rely on me as your only source ever of English. It doesn't really work that way, you need to be doing things outside of our class as well. If you're thinking of taking an e-education class, just a class online for the very first time, here's some tips for you. First of all, you need to bring something to the class. So you must have some kind of insight into your own English. If you don't, it's likely that your first lesson is going to have a lot of questions because the teacher has to identify what you're looking for. Is it writing practice? Is it speaking practice? Do you want practice with reading? Do you want help with grammar? All of these things have already been defined in a physical English class. But in an e-education class on a platform like italki, in other words, a class on Skype, these things need to be agreed and discovered. And usually that's done in the very first lesson. Many people choose e-education because it's much more flexible for them. They can come and go as much as they want. One warning about e-education, that is, there is a trend now, a fashion, that shorter classes are better. And if you feel that's the way it is for you, then that's fine. More and more people are choosing some kind of social media approach whereby they can maybe have a class for half an hour. Italki, as far as I'm aware, is looking at reducing class times anyway. It's also introducing group classes. So there are changes coming, but it looks like more and more people want very short bursts of English, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, because they can get those on other platforms. They don't really want to sit for an hour talking to a teacher because people can't seem to concentrate for very long now. So e-education is moving more and more away from traditional teaching into something much more social media based. And if you want evidence of that, if you remember italki's old website, people could post on their whole chunks of exams, like writing exams for IELTS, and a teacher would go through all of them and check them. Whereas now on the italki app, it's all set up for your favorite photos to comment on them, what you're doing today to comment, to write a few sentences to be corrected. And if you try and post a whole essay on there to be checked, largely you'll just be ignored. So it seems to me that e-education is going the same way as everything else in the world. It's being kind of narrowed down to accommodate a very fast pace of life for people who use technology a lot. That's fine for many people, but it's not so good for older people. Many of my students are older and they need a little bit more support. They need to know that the teacher is there listening to them. They want to connect maybe about topics which young people wouldn't have experienced or wouldn't know about. Also, older people may have greater social skills than younger people. So there's a lot to think about there. So e-education, in my experience, works much better for older people. When I say older, I mean, I'm not talking about very old. I'm talking about those people who perhaps are over 30. These are just a few points to consider. My calendar seems to be getting more and more full of people who just want 30-minute lessons and then vanish forever, which is fine. I mean, if that's where they're at, I'm happy to help them. But it's kind of sad that people don't really have the motivation or the time to put into English. One of my resolutions this year is to try to move away from technology just a little bit to give me more time away from it and to see how that goes. I've already been doing little bits of that, and it's helping my own mind be calmer, helping me to learn new things faster. So that's very good too. These are all things to consider if you are planning to do an e-lesson. Well, that's it from me for today. Whether you choose e-lessons online or whether you choose face-to-face lessons, italki teachers are here waiting for you to support you in whatever way they can. Just remember that you need to bring something to show us about your English level. And if you don't, we'll spend a lot of time trying to find what that is. So it's no problem if you're a little bit shy or nervous. That's it from me. See you. Bye.